Forum, and we are so excited to have you here in Bangor and to have the number of candidates that showed up and participated. Again, we want to let you know, if you've just come in, if you have questions during the actual forum, you can write down your question on the 4x6 cards that are in the back, raise your hand, and we have somebody that will come by, just kind of pass the card along like a hot dog down at Fenway at the end of the aisle, and they will bring them here for our moderator, and if the question has not been asked, or answered, excuse me, and we have time, then that will be our audience participation. I want to say thank you to Bangor Baptist Church for allowing us to use the beautiful facility here tonight. And again, I'm just so thankful. That's my home church. I want to thank them for their generosity in this. And I want to thank you as concerned citizens to show up and to hopefully get information tonight will help you with this very important decision we'll be making this fall. At this time, I'm going to ask Senator Nikki Farnham and Pastor Jerry Mick to make their way to the platform. Dr. Jerry Mick, the pastor of Bangor Baptist Church, is going to lead us in prayer, and then after that, Senator Nikki Farnham from right here in Bangor is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you all stand with me as we pray this evening? Our God, we thank you for this opportunity as free citizens to gather together. And Lord, we thank you for America that allows us these opportunities. And Lord, we thank you for people that run for office, the candidates they hear this evening. We want them to know that we appreciate them and their willingness to step out and to do what they feel is best for our country and for their lives and represent us. And so, Lord, tonight we ask for that you would help us to have good candor, good conduct, and may we represent you well. And once again, we ask your richest blessings upon this evening, and thank you for allowing us to gather together. For the organizations that are represented here this evening, we thank you for them and all the good work that they do. And tonight we ask that you might be glorified. We praise you and thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll have the singing of the national anthem by Mrs. Amy Howard.
Dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the brave and the home of the brave?
Amen. You may be seated. May be seated. Amy is a graduate of Bangor Christian School, 2002. Right next door here, I have to brag on Bangor Christian a little bit, has produced Trevor and Taryn Bragdon and many other well-known folks in this area. So, Amy, thank you so much for doing such a great job. Our moderator tonight is Pastor Bob Emmerich, and Bob Emmerich is one of a kind. Bob is the chairman of the Christian Civic League, and I don't know any pastor in the United States that's any more civically and politically connected, engaged than Bob Emmerich. And I asked Bob if he would be willing to do this, and I had to really twist his arm, but I'm going to ask Bob if he would come and talk about what the setup for the forum is and introduce some of our honored guests as well. Pastor Bob Emmerich.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you all for being here, and thank you, my good friends, candidates. You're in for a fun time. We had some good questions written down for you, but we thought they weren't quite mean enough, so we worked on them a little bit, so now we're ready. We want to begin, just take a quick moment and recognize some of our honored guests. We appreciate those who are willing to not only run for office, but once they get elected, they have to serve then afterwards and after the campaign's all over with, and we forget about them and they have to go to work. So we just want to recognize some of them, those that we know of, and I hope we're not leaving anyone out, but there are some who are here that are our state legislators. We have 3 state senators here with us. Senator Nikki Farnham, Senator Mike Thibodeau, and Senator Garrett Mason. And yes, we did check his ID, and he is old enough to be a senator. We also have some representatives here with us. We have the House Majority Leader, Phil Curtis, Representative Doug Damon, Representative Dale Crafts, Representative Stacey Guerin, and my good friend of many, many years, Representative Paul Davis. And as I said, I hope we didn't leave anyone. Are there any other legislators here? Oh, good. So far, so good. I would like to introduce to you the co-sponsors of the event. You have met Carol Conley, who is the Executive Director of the Christian Civic League of Maine. And also we have Penny Morrell, who is the State Director of Concerned Women for America of Maine. And then we also have Teresa Chumadajski, and she is with the Maine Right to Life, the Executive Director of Maine Right to Life Committee. And we want to thank them for sponsoring this event. We have, our format is very simple. We are going to try to go through. Each of the sponsors has 2 questions for each of the candidates, and then we will try to fit in a third depending on how our time goes this evening. And then, as you heard from Carol, we may or may not, and please understand that we may or may not have time for questions from the audience. And what we would like to do, if you have a question, as you heard earlier, there are some white cards like this. If you put your hand up, Terry Conley will get one of these white cards to you. You can write your question. Please write legibly. Print if you need to, whatever go find a printer and a computer, whatever is necessary, so that I can read it. And we can't promise that we will read them all, but we will check as quickly as we can, sort of in random order, to make sure that the questions are not redundant from what's already been asked. But we may have time for that. We will see how that goes. We're going to begin with the opening statements from the candidates. We're going to give each one of them 2 minutes for their opening remarks. And then when we begin the questions, they'll have a question, and they will then have, after that, 1.5 minutes to answer the question. And we'll deal with the follow-up if they become necessary. But that's sort of the format thus far. So we'll begin with the opening remarks, and I have set up a schedule, and I apologize to our candidates. I forgot to give you the order that who goes first and which one, but stay tuned and you'll find out. But for the opening remarks, Charlie Summers, who is a candidate for U.S. Senate, of course, is not able to be here. He was planning to be here and then had to alter his plans. And Representative Doug Damon is here, is going to read an opening statement on his behalf.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Representative Doug Damon from District 16 here in Bangor, and it's great to look out and see such a crowd. Tonight's statement I read is from Secretary Charlie Summers, who has a scheduling conflict, could not make it. So these words are his, not mine, but I am proud to present them. He starts, I truly regret that I am unable to participate in tonight's forum. Representative Doug Damon has been kind enough to attend and read the following statement on my behalf. I very much appreciate the role you as conservative activists have in some of the most important debates taking place in our country today, and there are many. I know you agree with me that traditional marriage between a man and a woman must be preserved. While I oppose discrimination of any kind, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and we must not allow anything to take away from that. You should also know that I was one of 12 Republican state senators to uphold Governor McKernan's veto of the gay rights bill on 2 separate occasions while serving in the Maine State Senate. On abortion, I believe exceptions must be made for the life of the mother or in cases of rape or incest, and that is why I have voted pro-choice. I also do not believe that governments should be involved in funding of abortions. Regarding the recent national debates on contraception, I do not support mandatory coverage of contraception. I do not support forcing an employer to offer a specific type of health insurance coverage, particularly if it is against their beliefs. I want you to know that I am running for the United States Senate because I believe America can do better. In his 1980 announcement for the presidency, Ronald Reagan outlined the great issues facing America and the lack of leadership in dealing with them. In reference to that lack of leadership, he said, I cannot and will not stand by and see this great country destroy itself. I was 20 years old then. Now, 32 years later, America finds herself in an eerily similar set of circumstances. Our nation's debt has skyrocketed, our economy is lagging, unemployment is too high, gas and oil prices are through the roof, and government bailouts and stimulus packages are not the answer. Our military spending is on track to be reduced by $1 trillion over the next 10 years. Yet the demand on our men and women in uniform continues to increase, as do our obligations at home and around the globe. And as if all of this was not enough, the largest federal program ever devised, Obamacare, is now poised to take control of 1/5 of our economy. I reject the notion that we can spend our way to prosperity. That is why I am running for United States Senate. I believe it is crucial that we have strong, experienced leadership in Washington, and I know that I can put my extensive real-world experience with small businesses and public service together with my foreign policy experience gained through the U.S. military to work on behalf of Maine and our nation. I have served in public office at various levels and capacities, first as a member of the Maine State Senate, then as State Director for Senator Snow, as the New England Regional Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, and now as Maine's 48th Secretary of State. I have also served my country as Commander in the United States Naval Reserve, serving in both of this generation's wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as on the staff of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I hope you will support me in my current endeavor to be Maine's next United States Senator. Again, I am sorry I could not be here in person tonight. I hope to meet each and every one of you on the campaign trail in the weeks to come. Thank you.
We'll grant him the grace for that extra time as the opening and closing remarks. We have now the order we're going to go in for this opening, for the opening remarks from the candidates who are here. We'll have Scott d'Amboise, if you would introduce yourself and go first, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to hold this forum here tonight, this debate. It's finally nice to have a debate. We've had forums where we just get to ask one question. And get to only answer one question. So hopefully tonight you'll be able to have the opportunity to hear and pick the candidate in which you feel will do the best job as your next United States Senator. Tell you a little bit about myself. Again, I'm Scott Danboys. I'm from Lisbon Falls. I grew up in the area. I grew up in Carmel. And my wife is from Bangor, and we've been married for 28 years. We're high school sweethearts, not at the same high school, though. We have two wonderful children. My son Gareth is 15, and our daughter Paige turns 13 in about a week and a half. And we're very blessed. We were unable to have children for the first 12 years of marriage. And one thing I have come to realize is they are not my children, they're the Lord's children. And the reason I'm running, and the reason I got into this race, was for my children, your children, and grandchildren. Look at where America is today. We have wonderful opportunity to be optimistic. But I feel a lot of the generations at my age and younger, they fear. They fear for their children. And they have a right to fear, but they also have a responsibility to step forward and do all that they can to teach Americanism and patriotism to their children. I love this country. I'm a conservative, constitutional Christian. I do not hide my social issues. I wear them proudly on my sleeve. I believe marriage is one man, one woman ordained before God. And I believe children are God's greatest gift. And it starts at the moment of conception. I have always been right to life. We actually just got endorsed by the National Republican Coalition to Life. And we will fight for the rights of the children. We will fight for your rights, and we will fight for the rights of marriage between one man and one woman. I also want you to let you know we got a lot to talk about tonight, about the budget, about the deficit, about taxes, about where this country is actually going. So hopefully tonight, come up and talk to me afterwards, and I'll be your candidate. Thank you.
Our second candidate will be Richard Bennett.
Hi, thanks so much, Bob, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for the hosts of this evening's event. My name is Rick Bennett. I live in Oxford. Until this election emerged, I was what I happily called myself a recovering politician because I served in the Maine House and the Maine Senate for a number of years back in the 1990s and was privileged to become eventually president of the Maine Senate back in about 10 years ago. Since then, I've been, maybe some of this is on your material, but since then I've been focused on raising my kids, who are now 16 and 14, and running my business. I am the only candidate here who has spent the better part of the last decade creating jobs in Maine and building a business in Maine, and that has informed much of my interest now in returning to public life and presenting myself as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. The principal reason, like Scott, my kids now are 16 and 14. I'm very blessed. My wife and I have a lovely daughter and a lovely son, and I think about releasing them into the world in a few short years. And I wonder what kind of world they'll be released into, and particularly with the level of deficit spending and irresponsibility that exists in Washington, D.C., and particularly under the leadership of Harry Reid in the United States Senate. It must end. We are spending every year more than $1 trillion, more than that is taken in, and the U.S. Senate has been spending that money without even passing or considering a budget. In my view, that's unconscionable. It's immoral that we've racked up $16 trillion of debt that my kids and our grandkids are going to have to pay for. It's immoral. It threatens our national security. It threatens our economy, and it limits and shackles their opportunities and freedoms in the coming lives that they will each try to build for themselves. It's great pleasure to be with all of you, seeing a lot of old friends. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Bruce Poliquin, please.
Thank you very much, Pastor Bob, for this opportunity, and I want to thank the sponsors very much for allowing us this event to take place. I am your state treasurer, Bruce Poliquin, and I can't tell you how much fun I'm having being your state treasurer, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have that position. When this opportunity presented itself to run for the United States Senate, I looked at my job, my responsibilities to you, the taxpayers, and my family, and concluded that although we're doing some tremendous work with a terrific governor in Augusta, we can only get so far in the state of Maine. We cannot fully fix the state of Maine until we fix Washington. Now, one of the things that I've been very proud of is our record in Augusta. For example, when we came to this new administration 15 months ago, we were handed with a $4.1 billion shortfall in the pension plan, the pension benefits we owed our teachers and our state workers, $4.1 billion. And folks said, you know, you can never change that, Bruce. It's too hard. The unions are too difficult. They're too strong. But what we were able to do was reform that pension plan such that we now have a plan that it gives more security for the folks that are in it. It also costs the taxpayers less. Because we reformed that, we're now spending $200 million less per year. And because of that, the legislature was able to pass the biggest tax cut in the history of Maine. So if you look at the problems in Maine, they're in great part financial. If you look at the problems in Washington, they're also financial. This is the 4th year in a row that career politicians in Augusta have spent $1 trillion more than they've collected from us in taxes. And they make up the difference by borrowing the money. And we now have $16 trillion in debt with no plan to pay it off. We need someone who understands these financial issues. I do. We need someone who is tough and who will go down there and tell the truth, regardless of the criticism. I'm a pro-life Catholic. I believe that when one mom and one dad get together, with the help of God, create a new life, nobody has the opportunity or the authority to terminate that life before its natural conclusion. I also believe very strongly in the Constitution, and the Second Amendment is very clear. The people of this country have the right to keep and to bear arms, and it shall not be infringed upon. Thank you very much. I look forward to the questions.
Deborah Plowman.
Thank you, Pastor Bob. Thank you for inviting us tonight. My name is Deborah Plowman, and I am the senator from the neighboring town in Hampden. And in November in 2010, people like you and I watched the walls of Jericho fall. We walked in, and we are making changes at the Maine legislature. In 1974, I was on one of the first buses to Washington, D.C. for the Hands Around the Capitol Life rally. In 1993, I voted against Governor McKernan's bill, an affirmative statement that said that there would be none limitations on a woman's right to an abortion, including waiting periods, parental notification, information. I was one of the few people on my committee to vote no, and I took some heat. And the heat I took was from our current U.S. Senator and then Governor McKernan. I sat on the Judiciary Committee for 8 years, and every year when an abortion bill came forward, I voted out a pro-life position, and I fought it. I fought until, with great heartbreak, the people of the state of Maine said partial birth abortion was okay. How that ever happened in our great state, will never, ever be answered to my satisfaction. But to end a life in the most horrific, horrendous way that you could even imagine was upheld. I have continued to put forth legislation, the last one being this year, when I asked that we join 36 other states and the United States government to recognize a woman's choice to have her baby, that choice that we're all supposed to be able to make. If you destroy that pregnancy, then that child should be recognized as an unborn child. I lost. I have fought this fight. I will continue to fight this fight. My voting record will also show that every year on the Judiciary Committee and ever since, I have voted to assure that marriage is between a man and a woman. Those are my basic principles. I hold them very, very dear. And I will, when you send me to Washington, be voting the same way I have voted for 16 out of the last 20 years. And I want to be your candidate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're ready for some questions, are we not? We have each of our, as I mentioned, each of our co-sponsors has several questions prepared for you. And this is the way that it will work. We'll begin with Penny Morrell from Concerned Women for America of Maine. She will ask a question, and then each of you will have a minute and a half to answer the question. If she needs to, if she's not satisfied with your answer, she may ask you a follow-up or a clarification. And we'll give you another 30 seconds to do that if need be. Okay? And we will go in this order. For the first question, we'll begin with Richard Bennett. And Penny, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, guests. Concerned Women for America has 6 core values that we lobby, and 3 of those are going to be in my questions tonight. Education, national sovereignty, and religious freedom. So with that in mind, Mr. Bennett, will you fight to guarantee the right of parents to decide how to educate their children in public, private, or homeschooling? Please include your positions on tax credits, vouchers, charter schools, public schools in our current system.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm a staunch advocate for all choice in public school, private school, parochial school, homeschool. In fact, the truth is that I've put my children through all 3 my wife and I started by homeschooling our children up until 3rd grade. We put them into the public school, and then now they're going to a private school. I think that it's elemental to being a parent. Elemental is decisions about how your kids are educated. And for my wife and myself, we felt it was terribly important for us to not expose our children to the cultural influences that exist in a lot of school environments, and so we chose to homeschool them at the beginning of their education. And then when they reached a certain age and we felt that their values were set and intact and they had the core, we decided to put them in the public school. And then thereafter, as I said, they're now in a private school. And I'm fortunate because, frankly, I make enough money so that they can go to private school. A lot of people don't. They ought to have those choices. They're paying tax money. They ought to be able to put that tax money, in my view, to any accredited school that they wish and let their kids get the education the parents decide is appropriate. Did I answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bruce Poliquin, please.
Thank you very much. This is on. Good. There's nothing more fundamental, in my opinion, than a great education, the best education for the child. It's not about the unions. It's not about the principal or the administrators. It's not about the teachers. It's about the kids. I have one son, Sam. He's 21. I absolutely adore him. We're very, very close. And I happen to think there are only 3 things you can give a child in his or her life. Number 1, a sound moral compass. Secondly, unconditional love. And thirdly, the best education possible. Now, we've been doing some great things in Augusta. And I happen to be very strongly that government is best when it's limited and closest to home. So if we have an opportunity to homeschool our kids, or kids having choice, so they can move from one school to another and takes tax dollars with them. You know, up until a few months ago, the state of Maine was only one of 10 states in this country where you didn't have charter schools allowed because the unions lobbied the legislators, the majority legislators, and prevented that from happening. We now have charter schools for the first time in the state of Maine. So if we have a family where you have a child that's tremendously gifted or has an acute interest in agriculture or the sciences, they will now be able to go to a school that specializes in that. That's not about the unions. That's not about the administrators. It's not about the teachers. It's about the child. I firmly believe that we must do everything we can to give parents the flexibility to have their kids educated the best way they should. My son was young when he was going from elementary school to middle school, so we took a year off and he was homeschooled. Not by me, my goodness, I couldn't do that. But he was homeschooled, and he did some tremendous things that he was unable to do and grew with that experience. So yes, we need to give kids choice and the parents the power to make that choice.
Deborah Plowman, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I'd like to acknowledge Senator Garrett Mason, who actually got that bill passed for us now that we have charter schools. This past year, we have debated some of these very issues in the Maine Senate and the Maine House, including vouchers, tax credits, and it's amazing how much resistance there is. And it comes from people who every day will tell you they're in it for the children. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure. First of all, the responsibility and the delegation of that responsibility to raise a child is very important to me. And that delegation comes along to you when that child arrives. Our job is to make sure that there is a choice. And I grew up in Lewiston, and I went to 12 years of Catholic school. We weren't wealthy. We didn't have to be, because before 1981, the legislature saw great value in supporting private schools. And in return, we took a huge load off of the city of Lewiston as we went forward. We got great education. In Glenburn, they used to have school choice and could figure out where they could send their children until there was a great thing called school consolidation. And every string that we have attached takes more and more choice away from our parents. I believe that the sovereign right to make the decisions for your children are given to you, and you have a duty to do right by them. I would prefer that there were vouchers, tax credits, because it is almost social cleansing at its finest form to say, if you're poor, you take what's given to you. But if you have means, you can take advantage of those things. That's not our country. And I don't believe that we should be continuing down that vein, and I'm very proud of what we've done in the legislature to move that along, and we need to do more. Thank you.
Scott DeAmboise, please.
Well, I look at this in two different ways. One, the Department of Education is unconstitutional, and they're destroying how our children are actually educated in this country. It needs to go back. We need to follow the 10th Amendment and allow states to be able to control the education, and actually go even further and let the towns and the communities be able to educate. But more importantly, it falls under the parents. This is the last year that my wife and I are allowing our children to go to public school. We have already discussed that we are homeschooling, and we were just recently down in Rockland to the homeschooling statewide seminar. We have a lot of friends who homeschool their children, And that's why we're taking our children out. We're taking them out for a couple reasons. My daughter's 7th grade teacher thinks that communism is okay, and she has no problem in telling the students this. It's not in the curriculum, but she still has no problem telling this. My son is a freshman in high school and knows more about civics than a 25 years tenured civics teacher. These are the problems we have. I believe that parents have a right to send their child to any school in which they choose, and that the money should follow the child from kindergarten to college all the way through. There's another thing on the floor of the House that has been put off and put off and put off on votes, but they've been trying to get it passed, is that the student loan debt, that if the government can take over that and take care of it for you, the one thing that they want to do, if the colleges agree to do that and the students agree to do that, is that the government has the right to teach the curriculum at the college. Therefore, all your Christian-based schools will not have the right to teach about life and marriage and other things. Thank you.
Thank you,
May
candidates.
I follow up with one quick question,
Yes,
moderator?
you may.
Thank you. Would you vote to abolish the Department of Education?
I already answered that one.
Just a yes. Oh, no.
I frankly haven't decided yet. My view is that everything should be on the chopping block because our deficits are too high. And so from that vantage point, I certainly would consider it.
I would consider that. However, as a United States Senator, I would want to make sure I get all the information to make the best decision I can possibly make, and with one thing in mind when it comes to education, which is the kids. I do know, and I'm a very strong believer in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, states' rights, and what the people and the states can't do. Only then does the federal government get involved. So I'd look at that very closely. I have not examined it as closely as I'd like to give you an answer right now.
I would most likely vote to abolish it. The education is a local issue. I don't believe it has helped us in any way, shape, or form. It sucks up a lot of money that should be going to children, and that's where the money's supposed to be going. And if they're not going to send us with their mandates, send the money, then they should not be sitting up there making these kind of requirements on us. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, candidates. I would ask you to, and you're doing very well, by the way, but I would just ask you to glance at our timer every once in a while. Notice the colored cards. Thank you very much. And I do have one quick announcement to make. Scott Fish, you need to check your messages. In our second round of questions, we're now ready for Teresa from Maine Right to Life. Do you have a question for these candidates?
Thank you, Pastor Bob. First of all, I'd like to say on behalf of Maine Right to Life Board of Directors, we thank you, honored candidates and panelists, for being here with us. Maine Right to Life, I'm very proud to say, is a very loyal organization. And our constituents represent over 50,000 pro-lifers throughout the entire state of Maine. They're very interested specifically in the life questions. We believe that's the fundamental of all rights. It's the cornerstone for every right in America. And we cherish every life from conception to natural death. Here's my first question, and it concerns the largest abortion provider in the United States, Planned Parenthood. Would you vote for legislation, much like the April 14th vote last year in the U.S. Senate, to defund Planned Parenthood of America?
And we'll begin with Bruce Poliquin, please.
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I believe that the federal government should not intrude upon someone's religious beliefs. And there are those taxpayers who believe in life like I do. And so I think it is completely inappropriate for the federal government to mandate taxpayers to fund this sort of practice against their belief. I remember when my son was in my late wife's womb, I used to go to all the doctor's appointments, and was just fascinated with the sonogram. And to see that child grow. Now, would someone tell me, when is that child a life? When the head is developed? Or do you have to wait until the arms and the legs are developed? Or do you have to wait until the fingers and the toes, or when you can see the eyes? I happen to believe, as a Catholic, that when a mom and a dad get together, with help from above, that life is a life at that time and should be protected. I also believe very strongly in the Constitution. And the Constitution should honor religious belief, and as a result should not force folks to use their tax dollars to fund something against their belief.
Deborah Plowman.
Thank you very much. I believe Planned Parenthood should be defunded. It is not a purveyor of the idea of choice. When you speak to young ladies who go for help, I have one young woman in my neighborhood who was approached 4 different times as she went looking for advice and told that she was making a choice, but it was the wrong choice. Every time she went and said, I have help, I have support, this is a baby, she was told, you're making the wrong choice. Planned Parenthood has taken what it's been given and turned into something that is health care, breast cancer, cervical screenings, all of which women need. But it's the front door. It's the front door that young women walk into looking for help, thinking that there's someone in there who's going to be very objective and help them make a decision. You know, 1993, Jack Wyman came before my committee, the former chair of the Christian Civic League, and he said, women need better choices. Better choices are not offered at Planned Parenthood. As a member of Feminists for Life, I work with girls on universities and with their professors to help them know that there are better choices. Do you know you can get an abortion under your health care plan at a college, but not maternity care? Do you know that if you want to be tenured, don't be pregnant? It's time that we start taking groups like that who believe in women. Planned Parenthood doesn't believe in women. Thank you.
Scott D'Amboise.
You know, this is one of the reasons I got into this race 2 years ago. Excuse me. Senator Snowe has been taking political contributions from Planned Parenthood for years. Even a good friend of mine, I had to show him that this is actually happening. And this is a problem we have with a lot of people in D.C. taking money to fund their campaigns by these types of groups. I've been opposed to Planned Parenthood and will continue to fight against Planned Parenthood. You know, as Ms. Plowman was saying, there's so many things that Planned Parenthood has also done outreach programs to, and it even goes further than what she said. They also have infiltrated themselves into groups. Now, some of you may have heard this, some of you may not, and I hope I don't shock any of you, especially if you have Girl Scouts. They have literally infiltrated into the Girl Scouts of America and teaching or giving seminars to young girls on how to get birth control, taking away the rights of the parents and putting it upon themselves. This is one of the reasons I had the courage and the conviction and the principles to get into this race. I'm not afraid to stand up to those people that think it's their right to have Planned Parenthood, but let me tell you what, it's our taxpayers' dollars, and it's being used to destroy the Lord's children, and we need to fight against it at all costs. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett.
With some important exceptions, I have generally been supportive of a woman's right to choose. I have to say, some of the issues that have arisen regarding Planned Parenthood are now being investigated. They ought to be investigated, and it raises a great deal of concerns about the funding that goes into Planned Parenthood from the federal government. I also don't believe in taxpayer funding of abortions. I think it is a line which should not be crossed. And it's very difficult with an organization like Planned Parenthood, where the funds are fungible, and there is not proper oversight in this important moral area for there to be effective accountability for the spending of those funds. They need auditing, they need investigation, and we need to make sure that that line is not crossed about the taxpayer subsidy for abortion. So I think that this is an area which merits investigation, and certainly defunding would be a possibility as far as I'm concerned. And again, we really need to make a decision about all spending in this country. And the question fundamentally is a program worth borrowing money from the Chinese that our kids will have to repay? That's the question as far as I'm concerned about any federal spending.
I have a quick follow-up specifically. You said that there's the possibility that you would look into funding or not funding. You're not certain whether you would fund?
I believe that we should defund some of Planned Parenthood. The amount, I don't know. I think that we need to look at we need to investigate and hold them accountable, which is not being properly done, particularly under the current administration, to make sure that there is no taxpayer funding of abortion, even indirectly.
If I were to tell you that in 2010, based on Planned Parenthood's own annual report, almost $500 million funded Planned Parenthood, what would you say to that?
$500 million of federal funding for Planned Parenthood?
Government, state, and federal.
Far too much.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Conley, are you ready for your question?
I think I am.
We'll begin with Deborah Plowman, and then we'll come right back to this end.
It's great to hear in your opening statements what you believe about core principles to us, especially from the faith community and as conservatives. But I'd like to know not only what your position is in regard to upholding the Defense of Marriage Act, as our present Attorney General is not doing, but I'd like to know what you would do specifically in regard to this or any other law that was not being executed by our government and by our Attorney General, specifically in regard to DOMA and specifically in regard to any other law that deals with same-sex marriage or the attempted redefinition of marriage.
It is the duty of the legislature or the Congress to pass the laws. It's the duty of the president to appoint persons who will uphold the laws. It's the duty of the courts to interpret the laws. In today's Washington, the legislature, the Congress makes the laws, the president ignores the laws, and the Supreme Court makes and legislates from the bench. None of this is appropriate. The fault lies with the president. The president has chosen people who will not enforce the laws as passed by Congress. If you think that that is what our founders meant, I would say otherwise. Our founders meant for everyone to do their part of the triangle that we have, the triangle of power, the three-legged stool. Congress can make better laws. We can have a better president. and we need a Supreme Court that understands what its role is as well. I think that the person who needs to be held accountable is the President of the United States.
Scott Danbois.
It's me. First thing I would do, if I'm your senator, is to try to get a constitutional amendment, a marriage between one man and one woman, get 3/4 of the states to ratify it, and that way it would take care of that problem. Again, why am I running? And why have I been in this race for 2 years? When Senator Snow had an opportunity to vote one man, one woman as a constitutional amendment, she voted undecided. These are the reasons I'm getting into this race. This is the reason I've been fighting for it. Look, I also want you to know the senator that you send to D.C. will be the one that sits face to face with the next Supreme Court justice. And in the next 4 years, that decision is going to be one of the most important decisions facing this country. If we get a Supreme Court justice along the lines of Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan and Ruth Gensheimer, we're done. This isn't going to matter what we the people want. They're going to push through their agendas like they already are now. They're legislating from the bench. And our senator, both our senators, supported Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor. And Snow also supported Ruth Gensheimer. So I can't stress how important that is as your senator to follow the Constitution and stop legislating from the bench and getting these judges to follow the Constitution. Thank you.
Bennett.
Well, there's several elements to your question, so let me try to address a couple of them. One is that I firmly believe that the definition of marriage should be between one man and one woman. I also have respect for the law, and I particularly respect the law that is passed by the people of Maine. And there have been several votes on this issue here in Maine, and the people of Maine have decided that marriage should be defined, as I suggested, between one man, one woman. And we need to uphold that and respect it. In my view, as an elected public official, I'm always troubled by the efforts from the legislature, from the executive branch, from the court, in undoing the express will of the people. I think it's fundamental to our democracy and fundamental to respect of who's really in charge of our democracy, to respect the will of the people. And particularly when it's expressed in public referendum, it's no clearer. But there's always efforts to erode and change the law because the administration doesn't like it, so he appoints people that are going to interpret a certain way, or they make some executive order or a signing statement which thwarts the will of the law, the appropriate lawmaking authority, whether it's the people or the legislature, the Congress, and I think it needs to stop. And really fundamental to me and my public record is respect for the will of the people.
I am a pro-life, traditional marriage Catholic. That's what I believe. I also believe in the Constitution. And I also realize that the root of many of our problems is that our federal government is too big, it's too expensive, and it's too intrusive. The states have always determined the definition of marriage. We have done that several times, as was just mentioned here, in the state of Maine. And we have an opportunity again to do it this November. If I have the opportunity to serve as the next United States Senator, I will believe what I believe in, which I just told you, but I will also uphold the Constitution. I do not believe the federal government should be involved in defining marriage. That should be something reserved for the states, which in my mind is very clear in the 10th Amendment.
No follow-up.
Okay. Before we begin round 2 of the questions, I would remind the timekeeper we'll give them 1.5 minutes for each question. They'll take as much time as we give them, so we have to be careful. Penny, do you have another question?
I do.
From
Can you hear me?
Concerned Women for America, yes.
Okay. This one has to do with religious expression. Will you vote to protect religious expression in a public setting? For instance, the 10 Commandments.
I'm sorry, we begin with Scott DeAmboise.
Definitely. One thing, every night when we say our prayers in the morning, and every night, when we have family prayer, we try to encourage our children, when they pray or when whoever is asked in our household to say the nightly prayer, to learn to love the commandments, learn to live the commandments. And, one thing I've always done in teaching Sunday school, I've taught the youth to memorize the 10 Commandments. I have the 10 Commandments memorized, and I try to live my life by them, because those are the basic laws to govern all. And there's no left of it, no right of it, no maybes or partialies. The law is right there. And every single law that we've had put forth in the Constitution falls under the 10 Commandments. So if more people would follow the 10 Commandments, we'd have a lot less problems in this country completely.
Given that my colleagues have taken so much time answering the questions and run over, I'm just going to say yes.
That's the first time, Rick.
The answer to the question is yes. I remember growing up in Waterville and, going to Sacred Heart Church, and, we had the manger in front of the school and in downtown, and the 10 Commandments were properly and proudly displayed. And I am a strong believer in all organized religions. Mine happens to be Catholic. Because if you look at the 10 Commandments, as Scott said, they're really the bedrock principles that we should all, in my opinion, live our lives by. And it doesn't matter what religion it is. It's when people twist religion and the teachings of religion to be harmful and hurtful, like some folks have done around the world. That's a time where really we have to step in and protect ourselves. But yes, I think there's plenty of room for that in our lives, and I think we're a less rich country, if you will, because we've been so picky about displacing that in the public square.
With the time that Rick Bennett yielded, thank you. Yes, from the creche in front of the church to the 10 Commandments to the Veterans Cross in the desert that we lost, there should be a recognition of religious expression of freedom. When we came here, it wasn't to get away from a religion. It was to find a way to follow our own religion. It is the basis of our country, religious freedom. To reject that is to reject our very beginnings. We are a Christian nation. We have other religions. They may come, but we should not feel that we're held hostage. Their religions will be honored. Our religions will be honored. And the atheists don't have to believe in anything. We're not asking them to. And that seems to be the source of where our rights are being challenged. And courts are again legislating our rights away. I would stand very firm on that.
Okay, Penny? Teresa, do you have another question for them, please? And we will begin with Rick Bennett, please.
Poll after poll indicates that the majority of Americans are pro-life and want some restriction on abortion. My question to each of you is an open-ended question, and it is, Under what circumstances, if any, would you favor legalized abortion?
As I indicated earlier, I'm generally adopt the position that a woman has the right to choose. I have voted and spoken on the floor of the Senate against late-term partial birth abortions, which has come up when I was in the Maine Senate. I find, as Senator Plowman said, it is a horrific procedure. It is clearly crossed the line where that life, which is in the mother, could live on its own. And my general belief is comes from a position of governmental sovereignty. Where does the government authority end? And it's very difficult because personally I abhor abortion. But the question for me as a public servant is, where does the government's authority end? And I respect the views that other people have expressed and that many of you I know hold about this important issue. But my view is that, the governmental authority should end at a person's skin for most decisions. And that, so my restrictions for this, for abortion would be around the late-term abortion and taxpayer funding of abortion, which I have never supported and think that we should completely eliminate wherever it rears its head.
It's clear to me that at conception, a life has begun. And that is a life that should be protected. I can't even imagine my life today without Sam. I have to tell you an interesting story that I think makes my point. I have a very good friend who has 3 boys. The 2 oldest are twins, and there was a problem at birth, and the second child did not get oxygen for about a minute and a half. The parents knew it, and they made a decision with totally different political beliefs than I do. They made a decision to have that child and protect that life. Zach is the most wonderful 25, 26-year-old fella. He is mentally disabled, but he's lovable, he is funny, he is an engaged part of that family, and I cannot imagine these folks without Zach, just like I could not imagine my life without Sam. Now, I also am a strong believer that the federal government is too intrusive. The only exception that I can think of right now is that when a doctor decides that the life of the mother or the child is in jeopardy, government does not belong in that decision. Government should not choose who lives. That decision, in my opinion, belongs to the mom, the dad, if there is one, and the doctor.
Life begins at conception. 25 so years ago, the Supreme Court legislated away the abortion laws that were passed by women, physicians, and newspaper editors. Because way back when, women had no control over their bodies. Your husband, your boyfriend, or your boss took you to the doctor and laid you on a table, and the doctor had no right to say no to the man. So abortion laws were put together for women to protect their children and to protect their rights to make decisions about their children. And that's where abortion laws came from. Somewhere along the line, someone convinced women that being fertile and having babies was a detriment to their lives as they should live them and to their careers. And so we have a very, very lively abortion industry all over the United States. A little while ago, a good friend of mine who was pregnant found out that her baby was going to have severe Down syndrome. And her doctor pressured her to have an abortion, and she said no. And when her baby came, he was very, very ill. And they took that baby and they wrapped him in a blanket and put a little hat on him, and they rocked him for hours. And they kissed him, and they loved him from this world into God's arms. If a doctor had had his way, he would have performed a late-term abortion, and that baby would not have been loved into God's arms. That baby would have been sent, and I won't be as graphic as you know it is, in horrific pain to God. Can you imagine God's hurt when he receives one of his children back in that condition? I don't believe unless a man and a woman are there during birth, and there needs to be a decision as to whether the mother or the child will be the one going to God's arms. That will be a decision made between them and their God. Women who choose abortions have the law on their side. But when they get to judgment, please don't say the Maine legislature said it was okay, I want to pass, because that's not how it works.
First, and you might disagree with this a little, but I believe that the only time a child's life should be aborted is if the mother's life is absolutely and completely in jeopardy. And that's through counsel with physicians, not a physician, physicians, religious leaders, and family, i.e., most important, the husband. I'm an emotional person. The reason I believe this, as I told you, my wife and I were 12 years before we could have a child. And my wife had a perfect pregnancy with our son, but a very, very traumatic birth. Anything that could go wrong was going wrong. And she started having seizures, her blood pressure was going, the baby's heart rate was dropping, and my wife was hemorrhaging. And the doctor said, we've got to rush her into surgery. As they rushed her into surgery, the doctor came back to me and said, I might only be able to save one of them. Tell me what to do. Save my wife. She's the love of my life, and I can never, ever have another one of her. But do your best to save both. We've been blessed. I have a son who is, again, 15 and such a wonderful child. And we were able to be blessed with a daughter 2.5 years later. So that's my decision and where I stand.
At Georgetown University said when it comes to the conflict between civil rights and religious rights, that civil rights will always trump religious rights. I would like to know whether you agree with that or not, and if you do not, I would ask you to tell us specifically what you would do as a U.S. Senator to protect citizens, workers, religious institutions who find themselves in a conflict of conscience in regard to areas such as we've described, abortion in the health field, those that are in regard to contraception that we recently see, and also in regard to same-sex marriage or any other religious issue where someone may find themselves in that conflict.
Thank you. It's a good question, Carol. I appreciate it very much. I think the Constitution protects American citizens both with their religious beliefs and also their civil liberties. I think that's very clear. Now, when you have this recent example of the federal government mandating the availability of contraceptives and specific health plans, I'm completely against that for a number of different reasons. First of all, I think that women who want to have available contraceptives, and they will have those, but the federal government should not mandate insurance companies, the private sector, to create specific policies, specific products. They can do that themselves, and I'm sure contraception will be available to women and men. However, when it comes to religious belief, if the federal government is mandating specific insurance policies to provide that product against the religious beliefs of those institutions that support that plan, that is a clear, in my mind, violation of someone's religious beliefs. As a United States Senator, I will vote against that.
You know, one of the things a lot of people don't know about is there is a conscientious objectors clause for doctors who don't want to perform abortions. And yet to graduate from medical school, you must perform one. You must be able to do this. We have already taken away the rights of these people who have conscientious objections to some of the things that you most and I most reject. There should not be a competition for rights. When the people who wrote our Constitution looked ahead, they didn't say your right trumps mine. They said that we all have rights. And one of the first ones they agreed to, that they knew that we needed, was our rights to hold our own religious beliefs. What we have done is to take tax policy, education policy, and every kind of other place where Congress has put its hands that it doesn't belong, and they have managed to fashion rules to make sure that while they speak about your conscientious objections, and they recognize your religious objections, and they promise you that you will be protected, they have taken it all away with a pen and a paragraph and sometimes a treatise, and it's time for us to take that back. Thank you.
You know, this goes so far. My children were not allowed to say Merry Christmas in school. They weren't allowed to have anything that resembles Christmas. I told my children, make sure every day you tell your teacher Merry Christmas. I will stand behind them 100%. These are the problems that we have when these civil liberty groups get involved. Anytime we, the people, want to say anything about God for God and for the commandments or for religion, we're frowned upon by the press. The press loves it. The liberal press jumps all over it all the time. And the problem we have is that for too long we've allowed judges to legislate from the bench. We've put judges in there that side on the groups of the civil liberties and avoiding the Constitution. Again, legislating from the bench, that the means of one outweigh the means of many. That's the problem we have. The first book that our founding fathers put forth for education was the Holy Bible. Not allowed to have that in school now. Some places you walk into school, if you're not a Christian-based school and you have a Bible, they're going to tell you that you can't have that, or if you have a shirt that has anything religious on it, they're going to make you take it off because they're afraid about getting sued or you're going to offend someone. These are the problems we have, and as I would vote no, I would do everything I can to fight these civil liberties groups completely.
Carol, can I ask you to tell me again who said this?
Kai Feldblum, that's the U.S. Commissioner of the Equal Opportunity Commission.
Well, I presume that this individual is probably a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough about the United States Constitution not to confuse the fact that that religious rights are a civil liberty. In fact, in the United States Constitution, we have a Bill of Rights. Many of those rights are expressed in the First Amendment, which is Article 1 of the Bill of Rights, which expressly protects religion from encroachment by the government. And I find it remarkable that somebody in that kind of position would not understand the first principle that civil liberties encompass religious rights and religious freedoms in our country. So, like the others here, I would vote strenuously and speak strenuously for religious rights, because there's so much wisdom in religion. I mean, whatever religion you are, some of the best writing, the most interesting stories, the loveliest narratives come out of our religious traditions. And to deny that and to say that, you can't post the Ten Commandments or you can't tell a religious story in a school or any of that nature, I find it really unfortunate and really silly. Because fundamentally, where does our wisdom derive?
We're going to move to each candidate having 2 minutes for closing remarks. So we'll go. Who got that first question from Carol?
I did.
You just had the last one.
I think Bruce answered it.
Bruce answers first. Okay, I'm sorry. So Deborah
now.
Plowman. Sorry, I should have had it written down.
Thank you
I'm
all
new
for
at this.
staying through all of this. I appreciate it. I have walked the walk, talked the talk, and kept the faith. Those are so trite sounding until you do that every year, year after year, in the Maine State Legislature. Tonight, you're seeing some of the candidates, very fine candidates before you, with a lot of similar views. When you leave here, you need to be thinking about who will be able to defeat Angus King and the Democrat in November. This is a two-step process. You have a good group of people to choose from. It's not a popularity contest. It's a competence contest. It is so important to this state and to our nation. This seat could very well provide the majority in the U.S. Senate. So when you're looking at all of us, look again to see who will be the person most likely to win November 12th. No, that's June 12th, in November. Getting my dates mixed up. I think I'm that person. I have been running campaigns since 1992. I have run and won all 9 of them. 10, if you count the leadership race, where my colleagues elected me as the assistant majority leader in the Maine State Senate. Number 10 should be June 12th. And number 11 should be in November. Because it's not just about picking the person who thinks like you, because you have some choices. It's who can run that mile, who can flesh out what the other parties are talking about, and who can land in Washington to do just what you've asked us to do tonight. In closing, my husband of 28 years is sitting in the back. We have 3 lovely children. We had 5 pregnancies. We cried over the 2 that didn't make it. But we love our children, and we love our grandchildren. Every one of them is a gift. And I have a job to make sure that the things passed to me and to you from the people in the 1800s, we get back to it and we pass it on to them. You have that duty. Your duty is to put somebody there to make sure that it happens. It now passes to you. I hope that you'll pray about it, think about it, and I hope that you will find that I am the person that can best do that for you in November this year. Thank you.
As I said, I've been in this race for 2 years. I had the courage, I had the conviction to challenge a political giant in Senator Snowe. When everybody said, "You're crazy, you're never going to beat her," one of the things that you are going to have a choice with is knowing who the true conservative is. And you're going to hear that word spread around a lot. Used to be a game show called To Tell the Truth. And it was up to you to figure out who was telling the truth. Now, I have no doubt that they have conservative values. But where was their conservative values and principles to stand up against a senator for years, but only got into this race after she dropped out? I want you to think about that. Americanism is being lost in this country. Patriotism is being lost. It is not being taught to our youth. And the next generation, they won't know about 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and who Jimmy Doolittle was, or even who the Pilgrims were. It's not taught anymore in schools. It needs to be taught in the homes. All problems can be solved when you sit at the dinner table and you talk to your children. I try to do that. I love my country. And I believe in a country where we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of entrepreneurship. Freedom is not free, and it's rare. And if we don't fight for it, it will be a thing of the past. And our children will look in the history books that they're being given on false history. So please, pray about it. I know I'm doing this for the right reasons, and I'd appreciate your vote on June 12th. Thank you.
Thank you again for your attention tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here before you. There is one issue that I'd like to bring up that didn't come up tonight, and I'll tell you why. I particularly want to bring it up, and that's the issue of gambling. Because in this state, we have seen a pernicious, creeping growth and expansion of gambling across our state. And I raise this because many people of faith have talked with me about this issue because of the corrosive impact it has on our communities, on individuals, on families. And this is a personal issue to me. In the Maine legislature, in the House, in the Senate, I stood up against any expansion of gambling, whether it's the lottery, whether it's a casino in Washington County, whether it was tribal gaming in Oxford County. And there was as you will recall, a couple of years ago, there was an effort to get an Oxford County casino built. And I just want to tell you that what you hear from me is the truth. And you may agree with me on some issues, you may disagree with me on some, but I will always tell you honestly where I stand. And one example of that is when almost all of the people in my community in Oxford who were feeling the pressure of a sagging economy and the destruction of the housing industry were turning to the the false choice of a gambling casino in Oxford. I stood up at the Oxford town meeting when almost everyone around me was opposed to my point of view, and I told why I thought this was the wrong choice for the people of Maine. It wasn't popular. I suffered in my community. My property was vandalized, but I spoke out, and we lost that. This is an important issue as far as I'm concerned, and I think I ask you to think about the great array of issues that we're all facing in this challenging time we live in. I would very much appreciate your consideration on the election on June 12th, because I believe that I am the strongest candidate to defeat Angus King in November, and that is the critical question here. We may disagree on some issues, and I know many of those issues are important to people, and everybody has to make their choice. But in my view, we need to defeat Angus King, and I'm the strongest candidate to do that. Please give that your consideration. Thank you very much.
Every day I talk to my son, who's 21 and now in school in Boston. And now and again he says, "Dad, you've got a really tough job being state treasurer. How you doing?" And I said, "Sam, this is the easiest job I've ever had. All you do is tell the truth and do what's right." This is a piece of molding from a Maine State Housing Authority project in Waterville. It's the old junior high school in Waterville where I went to school. My dad taught school. Because of the rules that we are now changing, this piece of molding had to be replaced exactly the way it was 80 or 90 years ago, even though it's going to be painted. This happens to be a piece of white oak, one of the most expensive pieces of interior finishing wood you can buy. So instead of having pine that you can paint and all kinds of other ways to drive down, thank you, Pastor, the price of housing, those 34 low-income apartments cost all of us $292,000 each. Now, this is when we have about 6,500 families in homeless shelters or on waiting lists to get into low-income apartments. I have a track record. I'm the only candidate who's a conservative, a true conservative, with a track record of fiscal reform. We have one heck of a governor. And when Paul LePage beat me in the gubernatorial primary, I didn't scatter. The next day, I called him up and asked him, "How can I help you win?" And I've been working with him ever since. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. We need someone, finally, who thinks like us, who is conservative, who will do the right thing, who's not a career politician, and who can wither the criticism. Because this race could very well determine the balance of power in Washington. I'm asking for your vote on June 12. As your state treasurer, I have done exactly what I told you I would do. If I have an opportunity to go down to Washington, I will do exactly what I told you I have done tonight. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Can we just thank the candidates for taking the time to be here with us? And once again, let's say thank you to Dr. Jerry Mick and the folks at Bangor Baptist Church for the use of their facilities. And our sponsors, the Christian Civic League of Maine, Concerned Women for America of Maine, and Maine Right to Life Committee. Thank you very much. And I want to encourage each of you before you leave this evening, if you're not already familiar with our sponsors and their organizations, take time to visit their table at the back on your way or speak to any of these, our sponsors who are asking the questions. You should know each of these organizations, and they will be a great help to you going forward as well. I also want to thank you for being here, and I want to remind all of us that this event tonight Your being here this evening and these candidates and their willingness to be here tonight is an indication, and should be a greater indication to many people, that social conservatives and their issues are important to the people of Maine. I appreciate your being here and your patience, taking the time to hear from the candidates. If you have further questions from them, I would encourage you to contact them. You can get their email address, their telephone numbers. They'd be happy to give that to you. If you would like to take a moment or two to visit with them as soon as we conclude here, you're welcome to do that, but we would ask you to just be mindful of the time. They have traveling to do, and they all have other events they need to go to tomorrow. So we'll ask you not to monopolize their time so that they can greet as many folks as possible on their way out as well. Lastly, let me encourage you to do this very, very important thing, and that is to be sure that you are registered to vote. Make sure that you're registered, that your family, those who are qualified in your family are registered to vote, and the folks in your churches also registered to vote. It's good for us to question candidates, to hear from candidates, but all of that is for naught if we're not registered and if we don't go to the polls and cast our votes. So I encourage you to please be mindful of that and be sure you're prepared to do that. Now, just as we conclude, I'm going to put Pastor Matt Ward on the spot and ask him if he would just provide for us with the benediction for this evening. I would have warned you earlier, Matt, but I didn't see you.
Singing will cost you, but I'll pray for you. Thank you, Lord, so much for this opportunity to gather. We thank you for these candidates, and we pray for every one of them. We ask that your hand would be on them, that you would protect them. As they travel, I pray that you'll keep them safe. We pray that you'll give them health, keep them strong. And we do appreciate them, and we honor them as we should tonight. And we ask that your will would be done. You would continue to work in the state of Maine. We thank you for it. We thank you for the people that are here. And these folks that are here tonight care about us, care about our neighbors and our neighborhoods and our nation. So, Lord, we pray that you'll guide, and we give you thanks and honor tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.